Today, as I teased last week, we'll be going into a little 4-part mini-series about these cameras that I've received before they go on the shelf. This is the Kodak Duo Six-20. It's a bit hard to see with the lighting setup as it is, but it is, and it is a Series 2, as it says here on the back, if you can tell. It's older than the Kodaks that we've looked at in the past. This one was made between 1937 and 1939. But it is another similar medium format camera. It uses the 620 rolls of film, which is really cool. They got a little advertisement in there for Kodak film and what numbers you should buy of the various types. Regular NC, Verichrome, panchromatic, or panatomic. Really cool. I don't know what any of those mean, but I assume they're different types of film that give you different types of exposures. I did not research into that. And on that note, all of the videos that we'll be looking at, I can say are pretty surface level. I did a little bit of research. I picked out what I thought was interesting to make a short little video, and that's what we've got. As noted on the back, whether or not you can see it, this is a Series 2. I found that this was sold originally for $57.50, which, given for inflation, is $1,273.69. So it was not cheap to get a camera back in, not World War II, but just before. This is pretty cool. And the first thing I noticed, a little slide here so that you can look in to see the film and see how many exposures you have left. Similar to some of the Kodak brownies that we were looking at, but I like the way this one functions. So the controls on the top, fairly simple, but really cool. You actually have a little control wheel here for your depth of field. Depending on how far away you are from your subject, you can control that, and it's got a gauge on it. I don't know if you can see that, that shows you your iris, and it's got all the numbers 3.5, 4, 5.6, 8, all the way up to 22, which is pretty cool. Your film wind here goes around. That would be winding the film inside of the camera. Now, how do you see what your image is going to be? You get a little flip up. Look at that. Yeah, it has a little piece of glass in it. This one is cracked, unfortunately, if you can see that. But I mean, it's almost 100 years old at this point, so it makes sense. I'm gonna jump right to my favorite feature right here. Obviously, the front of the camera doesn't look like much with everything here, but you pop this open. Oh, it got a little stuck. For the reveal, ta-da! I love this. It's got little bellows in it. I've never had a camera with bellows before, and then just beautiful looking at it. There we go. Really cool. It did come in a couple different options here. What we have here is the Compure Rapid. There was also just the Compure, but for the US market, there was also either 3.5 or 4.5 Kodak and Stigmat. That was the name of it. So you could get either a 3.5, those are your shutter, or those are your apertures, 3.5 or 4.5. Overseas, there were a couple different options, including, hope I pronounced this correctly. It's a name I'm becoming more familiar with and desperately want to try out one of their lenses. Zeiss, Z-E-I-S-S. Maybe that's right. It's definitely an overseas company making those, but they've been around. They still make lenses, and they make some really nice filmmaking lenses. It's one that I would first love to try one of them, but they are, as you can imagine, quite expensive. Maybe I can get some old ones that are vintage and try them out in some way. So this is, I don't know if you can see it all the way inside of there, but on the inside of the lens in this ring here, it does say the Kodak and Stigmat f3.5. My f-stop is 3.5 on this camera. That's what it mentioned. And I found that the 4.5 lenses utilized front element focusing, while the f3.5 lenses were unit focusing. It's pretty cool. I'm not 100% sure how all this works, and that's not just because I couldn't find too much information, documentation on how it physically worked. It's also a lack of knowledge for the time period of how a camera like this would work. I imagine I could figure it out if I had some film and started playing around with it. We also have the same thing here as almost on the top for the iris, but this is where you can actually set it for how many feet, and you can go all the way to 3.5 feet for your focusing distance. So you've got that there, and then there's another tiny little knob right here that I can barely make out the numbers that set your shutter exposure. And it seems you could pull that to there. That little piece pops out down there, and that releases when you release the shutter. There's another ring on here that I'm sure you won't be able to make out, but it also has the numbers 1, 2, 5, 10, 25, 50, 100, 250, 500, all along it with T and B. What are those? I wonder. I actually don't know. I wasn't able to find out online. Bulb, I could imagine a long exposure for bulb, but I don't know if that's a thing back this time period. I don't know. There wasn't too much that I could find out about how this camera worked, but I did find a really interesting article. I believe his name is Mike Ekman. I will include it in the description. I highly recommend you go read it. The guy is far smarter than I am. That's the kind of thing where, like I said, I'm just doing an overview, and other people have done much, much deeper dives. If this doesn't scratch that itch and you want to learn more, by all means, go look. I got my itch scratched. That sounds weird. Don't say it like that. I'm satisfied knowing the information that I do about this. And the last piece of information that we really have about this camera specifically is more about the history of it. It could be, I could not verify concretely, but it is possible, given the collection and where it came from, that this was my dad's dad, or in other words, my grandfather's camera. The time period fits. It's definitely possible, but my dad doesn't remember. So there's really no way to know 100%, but I'm going to believe that it is. So that's pretty cool. This camera's been in my family for 3 generations. Boop. I like playing with this. I like seeing it. The bellows looks really neat. I love the look of this older camera. It reminds me of that style, much smaller, of the bellows camera with the photographer who would put the hood over. And yeah, it's really neat to see the way the technology has come along. And I very much like this. And the fact that it's got a bit of family history, possibly, as far as I can believe, that just, icing on the cake, I suppose. I'm really happy to have this in the collection. This is really cool. And that's going to be it. Like I said, just a quick little overview of the cameras and the little things that I could find out about each of them. Next week, we'll be diving into a different camera made by a different company. It goes without saying, but this is something that I like.